the president, Greater Kane County. I'm so glad you all came. I want to welcome you on behalf of Wild Ones of Greater Kane County and our partner, the Gale Borden Library, who's just such a great partner to us. So thank you so much for coming to this presentation. Well, I am just so delighted to have Cindy Crosby back. We've had her before, and I've done many events with her, and she's just such a delightful person. And she is talking about bison tails and tallgrass trails. Because I know people will be asking, the bison are actually coming to Burlington Prairie. And I just did a little text back and forth with Ben Haberther, who's the director of our forest preserve, and they will be coming the week after Thanksgiving. So that's really exciting. They are coming from Nachusa, and I think there will be between 6 and 8 of them. They're not having a big event right now, and they're not saying which day they're actually coming. And also the road that they'll be on will be closed by Burlington on December 15th, so you won't be able to see them now. But there will be probably more of an event in the spring. So if you want to get your bison fix, you have to go to Fermi or out to Nachusa or trek out to Yellowstone. But so, in fact, I've offered to get these really cute signs that I've seen is that do not pet the fluffy cows. So, but so far they haven't taken me up on it. But as you all know, people in Yellowstone have a tendency to want to pet the fluffy cows. So we want to avoid that here. They have a very nice fence out there. I have not seen it yet. But anyway, I'm excited that they're finally coming because they've been talking about it for quite a while. So anyway, go on. Okay, so many of you probably already know Cindy, and that's why you're here and online. Cindy earned her master's degree in natural resources. She's a master gardener. She's a member of the Wild Ones of DuPage County, and she's steward emeritus for Schulenburg Prairie at the Morton Arboretum. And she's a dragonfly steward at Nachusa. She writes a weekly newsletter, online newsletter called Tuesdays in the Tallgrass, which is just a delightful thing to read, and you can just sign up for that, and it's free. She is an author, a compiler, and or a contributor to more than 20 books. She gives daily history She gives natural history programs to many groups, including ours, of course, on topics such as dragonflies, prairie ecology, and also things nature. So she's just a delight to have back, and I'm glad to introduce Cindy Crosby.
Wow, so exciting. You have bison coming. Are you so excited? Yeah, this is great. So pretty soon this will look like Kane County, right? This is from the Nachusa Grasslands, and I am so excited to get to talk to you about the bison tonight. You are in for such a treat to have them so close by. I was really unfamiliar with bison 15 years ago. So it has been such a treat for me to really get acquainted with them and to learn a little bit more about them. So I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about that with you this evening. And also the prairie, right? The tall grass prairie. All of the wild ones who are here love those native plants, and hopefully all of you do as well. But you're going to see a lot of native prairie plants this evening too, because bison and prairie plants go together. Like for me, coffee and chocolate, they're just like inseparable. Did you all see the Northern Lights a few nights ago? Yeah, wasn't that exciting? So there are wonders happening in the sky, and there are wonders happening out on the Burlington Prairie before very long. And thank you for that update too. That was really great to hear from Ben. So I want you all to just think for a minute. You're probably trying to quiet your minds down a little bit, right? You rushed home, had dinner, rushed over here to this beautiful Gale Borden Library. I love it when I have a program here. And then the wild ones, it's like, icing on the cake, right? But look at this bison. When you think of bison, raise your hand and tell me a couple of words that come to your mind. The burly bison of Burlington Prairie. I love it. It's a great one. I'll have to remember that one. That's really good. Yeah. Any other words you can think of?
Shaggy.
Shaggy bison. They really do look shaggy, don't they? Yeah. When I think of Shaggy, I think of Scooby-Doo, you know, wasn't that his sidekick? Yeah, Shaggy. Anybody else? Yeah, those are all great words. And the program tonight is going to be an hour long. So what do we got? Yes, about 10. Are we good? I'm going to check. She's going to check and see if we're. Want to get the camera. Hello. Yeah, thank you all for waiting so patiently. We've been talking, I don't know if you could hear us while you were waiting on the visual, but we've been talking about words that go along with bison, and we've had some really good ones. The burly bison of Burlington Prairie may be my favorite. That's a new one for me too. And we're gonna wait and hear if all is well back in Techland. Awesome. And I think, are we good if we switch photos now? Yes, look at that. Yay. Good job. Like I said, it's always wonderful to be with the folks at the library because they have such wonderful tech folks and they always know a lot more about tech than I do. So tonight we are going to take a whirlwind tour through the bison. And what my hope for you is it is like a little spark that will ignite this excitement for you. And when you're done, you'll be like out in the library going, where are your books on bison? And I got to learn more about bison, because what we're going to talk about in this hour together is just maybe a paragraph in the history and the story of bison. There are many, many things we won't be able to talk about unless the wild ones will let me stay for 4 or 5 hours, right? Yeah. But I'm going to give you a lot of resources too that you can go check at the library or check online as well. We know that the indigenous people had a very special relationship with the bison, and that's really closely tied to the demise of the bison and how we almost lost them. We know that the bison have this very important relationship with native plants and with prairies. And without bison, prairies are going to be a little different than they are with bison. So we'll look at what some of those relationships are. And then we'll also look at, I wish I could sit down with each of you and hear your story, because I bet every one of you has a bison story, right? I will tell you a little bit about my story, and also my husband, Jack, who's sitting over here. Hi, honey. Yeah, you can't see him on there, but he's the guy that brought all the stuff in. And about our relationship with bison and kind of how that came about as well. And in fact, our story begins at this place. And does anybody know? I look right in the front. Anybody know? Like, yeah, where are we? You can type in the chat box if you want to, if you're watching online. Where are we at? Fermilab, right? And I love Fermilab because when we moved to the Chicago region, we had moved from a rural area, and I was like, oh, we live in the big city now. We live in Glen Ellen. I mean, it's not that big, but it felt really big to me. And one of the things my husband and I love to do, we had 2 teenagers, was to try to get them outdoors. They were not always willing to go. So we found if we went on bike rides, they liked that a lot better than hiking. So we would go. At that time, Fermilab was very open to the public, and we'd take our bikes and we would bike. And of course, as we biked, we would see these. And this is from Fermilab. These are the Fermilab bison. And they were so excited, and so were we, because you don't just see bison every day. And so that was kind of our introduction to Illinois. And I learned as we went to Fermi more and more that these bison were put in there by Director Robert Wilson. And Director Robert Wilson, he was a very visionary guy. He wanted to bring bison to Fermilab. He said, we want to recognize the frontier prairie of Illinois with the bison and the prairie as we are exploring the scientific frontier of particle accelerators. Isn't that great? And many of you who know the prairie story of Fermilab and being out there know that it was Dr. Wilson who, when Ray Schulenberg and Dr. Robert Betts went to him and said, we really think you should take all this land and make it prairie. And he said, I think as the story goes, well, how long will it take? And Dr. Betts looked 40 years. Dr. Wilson thought for a minute, so I guess we better get started then, right? Yeah. So what a great attitude, right? This is how we have so many beautiful spaces in Illinois. At that time, though, when we were out here biking on at Fermilab, I was still learning about what a prairie was, and I began working as a volunteer on the Schulenburg Prairie at the Morton Arboretum. Who's been there? Raise your hand. Oh yeah, look at this. You are my people. Yes. And as I volunteered there and later became a steward there, I was learning about the native plants that would be so important to the bison. I began writing about the prairie, so the books are over there on the table for those of you who are here, because I love the stories of the Tallgrass Prairie, and I love the stories of this new place I found myself in, my new landscape of home, Illinois. I began then working with the tiny dragonflies. They weigh about 0.02 ounces, and getting involved with them. So I was looking at the very small things. And, as I worked with them at Nachusa Grasslands, which is out in Franklin Grove by Dixon, Illinois. Who's been there? Raise your hand. Yeah, and in the chat box, you can type if you've been there as well. So we're not really known for dragonflies there, although we have a robust dragonfly program. We're known for the 200,000 pound, or we'll say, yeah, they're big, right? Yeah, the big guys, the 2,000 pound, not 200, but 2,000. Big, shaggy, charismatic megafauna called the bison. So when they decided to bring bison to the Chusa Grasslands, I was working on my master's degree for University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. Do we have any pointers here tonight? You are the first pointer I have had. All right, go pointers. Woo! And maybe some of you watching online too have that as well. But my master's degree, which I was very fortunate to be able to do my final project at Nachusa, was how do you bring people to a conservation site that is about to add bison, because they were ready to add bison to the property. And until then, they had been known for more than 750 species of native plants and other plants. They have been known for their amazing reptiles and amphibians and birds, more than 200 species of birds, and all this rare habitat for plants. And then you're going to put bison in there, but then there's going to be lots and lots of people that come to see them, like you and me. So it was like, how can you bring bison to this property and still honor the property as a conservation site? And in fact, we estimated there used to be about 1,000 people a year, maybe 800 to 1,000, that would come, drive by the property, maybe go for a little walk. After the bison came, just one Autumn on the Prairie celebration, you would have 800 to 1,000 people show up for that. So, I mean, woo, people like to see bison, don't they? So it was a dark and stormy night. The very dark and stormy night in the fall of 2014. And my husband, Jeff, and I were standing by the newly built bison corrals with, there was a Chicago Tribune reporter. There were all the stewards there that had worked so hard to build the corrals and to build the bison fence and learn about the bison. We were all waiting in these lit corrals and watching for the semis to come down the road. And then we saw the lights in the distance, and the wind was howling. We were shivering, and we're like, the bison are coming, the bison are coming. We were all like so excited. And the semis pulled into the corral. We held our breath. They opened the back of the semis. Nothing happened. And everybody waited for a little bit. And then they were like, I mean, what do you do when a bison doesn't want to come off of a semi? Here, bison. They tried, they had little flags and they tried like tapping on this. Bison weren't going to come out. So if a bison doesn't want to come out, it stays right where it was. And we decided we would go across the street and have some bison cookies and coffee and call it a night. And sure enough, all night they stayed in the semi and we all went home. And the next morning, one of the bison looked out and said, it looks pretty good out there. got off and the rest of them followed. And that was the beginning of the wild bison coming back to Illinois and being at Nechusa Grasslands. It was very exciting. In the book, Tallgrass, Prairie Conversations, I write a lot about my fear of these bison. Not that I was afraid of the bison themselves, but I was afraid it was going to look a little bit like when you go by a llama farm or an ostrich farm. It's like, what are those strange things, when they put them out there. But in fact, when those bison were there, I wrote it in a chapter. This was a different chapter in the book about like what it was like to see them come back. And how many of you do puzzles? Does anybody do puzzles here? Yeah, I was a big puzzler during the pandemic, especially, and I still love to do them. But I thought of Nechusa as a little bit like a puzzle. There were all these great conservation pieces. There were the birds. There were the really cool amphibians and ornate box turtles and little tiny dragonflies that I chased around, all the different species of dragonflies. But it was always missing a piece of the puzzle. And if you have ever done a 1,000-piece puzzle and you've got it all done and there is one piece missing, that's never happened to you. It happens to me all the time. You would think it didn't make any difference, right? Well, I got 999 pieces done. So does the one piece really matter? Does it matter? Oh yeah, you're like down on the floor under the couch looking for that piece of the puzzle. And that's kind of how it was when the bison came back. It was like that last piece snapped in. And of course, there's still more conservation things to come, but it was like that really important piece snapped back into the puzzle and it looked complete. And in fact, seeing the bison out in these native plants of Illinois, watching them move across the landscape, it was like, of course, these bison have always belonged here. This is where they're supposed to be, and it felt right because it looked like they were in their landscape of home, which in fact they were. So it was like seeing that puzzle all come together. And now, of course, we can go to places too in Northwest Indiana. Maybe you've been to Kankakee Sands, a nature conservancy site. Trevor Edmondson is a wonderful manager out there. And you can go other places like Burlington Prairie where they're going to be. And you see them on the land and on the prairie and you're like, of course, they belong here. So what are these bison you keep talking about, Cindy? Let's take a look. I love what Brave Buffalo said. He was a hunk Papa Sioux. He said, let a man decide on his favorite animal and make a study of it, learning its innocent ways. Let him learn to understand its sounds and motions. The animals want to connect with man, but man must do the greater part in securing an understanding. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to secure an understanding with them. To understand what a bison is, of course, we got to get in our time machine. We got to go back millions of years ago, where academic Robert Morrissey tells us we discover the bison in some form broke away from a primitive cow family called Leptobus and became its own family, the bison family, a true grassland specialist. The American bison we know today is basically descended from all these different animals. We're showing them in order of size here rather than the time period. But we do know that when you talk about bison, you also have to think about the wood bison, which is up in Canada. Maybe you've been up there and seen the wood bison. This one has this really cool name, scientific name called Bison athabascae. And they were almost extinct in Canada. They were able to save some of them and move them into a special national park there and care for them. They're a little bigger than our bison. And then our bison, isn't that fun to say? Bison. That's an easy one to remember. We think came down from this land bridge and came down into North America and once roamed across most of North America. And that really threw me. I didn't realize bison used to kind of be like out on the East Coast and all different places. And of course, we had bison in Illinois, but where we mostly think of them is in the Great Plains, right? Those old John Wayne movies, right? Where you see the big crowds of bison going across. In Illinois, which is the heart of the ecotone or the kind of transition between tallgrass prairie and forests, we know that Native Americans and indigenous people hunted the bison, and they hunted them on foot because there were no horses here yet. Can you imagine this? Wow. I mean, I think about that and I just think that would be so crazy. And then the bison numbers began increasing here in Illinois in the 1300s and significantly here from the 1500s onward, although we never had the large populations of bison that they had in the Great Plains. So you probably hear me saying a lot of different names like bison and buffalo, right? Many people say, well, is it a bison or is it a buffalo? What do you think? Bison or buffalo? Yeah, bison. I hear bison. I see some buffaloes back there. In fact, we call them American buffalo because the true buffalo, they say, are like the Cape buffalo and water buffalo that are indigenous to Africa and to Asia. They're different genus. They're a different genus. But it's common usage today to call them buffalo. So you can tell your friends it's okay if I say buffalo. And it's also common usage to call them a bison. If you're a scientist, you probably hear the word bison. And bison is a plains bison. We think it comes, buffalo or bison comes from the word, from the French boeuf or boeuf. That's my best French for you. I took German in high school. I'm very good with my French. But the Department of the Interior tells us that that's probably where we got that name because that's the French word for beef. And of course, they had not seen the plains bison before. We also know indigenous people had many different names. Depending on what tribe you were from, you would have a different name for the buffalo. And just for starters, Cody Considine, who works with the bison at Nachusa, told me that when Native Americans were being Americanized, they said, or being, they were trying to get all the indigenous languages and things squashed and trying to help them forget, all of their important rituals and songs and names for things. They didn't want them to use these names anymore. There was Tatanka, there was Ivan Bito, there was Inawa, there was then the buffalo. And the buffalo was the name that when they were forbidden, in some cases, to use their native names for the bison, they all agreed, let's call it the buffalo. So it's honoring to Native Americans when you use the word American buffalo, and it's just fine to say that. So yeah, there you go. I have some bison buffs here in the audience tonight who are going to help us with some knowledge about the bison. Thank you for being here tonight, bison buffs, and they are among us right now. And I think our bison buff number one has something to tell us about bison. Where are you, bison buff number one? You want to stand up and tell us, and then we'll show it on the screen for the folks who are watching at home.
Sure. Bison are the largest mammal in North America.
Ooh, the largest mammal in North America. That I always thought it would be like the grizzly bear, maybe. That was always the one I thought. So I was surprised to learn this, but in fact, bison are very, very large. The bulls can stand 6 feet at the shoulder and be 11 feet long. Think about that, 11 feet long. So my ceilings in my house are probably 8 feet. So a bison at the shoulder, woohoo! If you stood a bison like on its side, you can see it stretching out that far. The females weigh around 1,100 pounds, more or less, and the males can weigh up to 2,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds. So that's about the same as a Miata Roadster. Yeah, so when you think of how much it weighs, you think, wow, that's a lot. That could be a lot. And I should say right here, I'm going to go back to this picture. You might be saying right now, Cindy, where are you standing when you took this photo of the bison, right? So this is a really good point for me to say, I have a zoom lens, and most, if not almost all the photos you see are taken from a vehicle inside the bison unit or behind a vehicle that is in the bison unit with a zoom lens. So even though they look close, this one looks like Gandalf saying, "You shall not pass," right? And in fact, we did have to drive down a different way because he did not want us to pass. So we have another bison buff here too. Bison buff number 2.
Baby bison are called calves and weigh approximately 50 pounds at birth.
So baby bison, yeah. 50 pounds. I thought my son was big when he was born. He was an 8.8 pounder. But baby bison are so cute, aren't they? And you can see why they have the nickname red dogs, because they have that beautiful, beautiful color when they're born. They turn brown after a few months, and then they get humps and horns. You see those start to grow. A cow's pregnancy is going to be about 9.5 months. So kind of like not too far from a human's. And most of the cows will give birth to a single calf. So when you see, Susan Kleiman taught me this at Nachusa, when you see the two, maybe you see two babies together and you think, oh, are they twins? She said, usually they're just having a play date. So they're not, most moms are only going to have one. And the babies will stay with mom for about 9 months. Mom will communicate with them through grunts and body language and snorts. And then the new mothers get together and form nursery bands and kind of care for the babies together, which I think is really sweet. So they have have their coffee, the kids get to go play and they have a good time. How about this? You hear about the white bison, and when a white bison calf is born, this is one of the most sacred things to certain indigenous tribes. And the female, this one is called Miracle. It was born in Janesville, Wisconsin in 1994. And some of them will change to brown as they get older as well. So if you're interested in Native Americans and the white bison, I would encourage you to go home and Google that, because you will be like immersed all day. I was like, wow, you could do a whole program just on this and its importance. But I thought that was really interesting. Number 3, we have another bison buff. Where do we, oh, John's got it. What do you got, John?
Bison may live to be 10 to 25 years old.
Ooh. So is that longer than you thought, or shorter? What do you think? Yeah, a little shorter. In the wild, 15 years, as I understand it, is pretty normal for a bison. When they're raised or ranched domestically, 25 years could be normal because they're getting all that, care and supplemental feeding. The oldest recorded age of a bison I was able to find was both a 30-year-old male at the Golden Gate State Park out in California. It's kind of a display bison, but there are some records that note like a bison at 40 years. So yeah, they can live a long time. How about number 4? Do we have a number 4? Yeah, she's like, oh, it's me.
In the summer, bison males' thoughts turn toward love and hope.
Ooh, okay, this is the PG-13 part of our program here. If you go out to see the bison at, we'll say, Burlington Prairie next summer, right? Since you just said they're going to be there, yeah, they'll be out on the prairie. They usually July or August, that's when the males come into rut, and they can't eat, they can't sleep, they lose up to 200 pounds because they are so lovesick. The age for a male to breed is usually 6 to 10 years, whereas the cows can breed at about 2 years old. And when those males come into rut, when I'm out with, that's when dragonflies are really flying. So I'm out with my little clipboard and you can hear them bellowing. And let me tell you, it sends like shiver. I'm always like, where was that? And a lot of times Jeff will go with me and he'll sit in his lawn chair with his book and he'll be like, bison coming, so he's my bison spotter. But it's really important to be careful during July and August because bison are very dangerous. They will find like a female they want to mate with, and then do they take her out to dinner? No. They will go on to the next female and the next female. And the females really love the guys that are loud and raucous and that roll around and butt heads with the other guys. So, the more, I don't know, the more flamboyant, I guess, the better. There they are, yeah. And so this is a good distance to be away when the rut is happening, but you do have to keep your eyes on them. How about number 5? Who's got number 5?
It can be different. It can be difficult to tell male and female bison apart.
Ooh, can it be that tricky to tell males and females apart? You're like, Cindy, they have certain parts, right? You should be able to tell which is the guy and the gal. But it is amazing. I know I really struggle to tell them apart, and that's because males and females both have the horns. And I used to think it was only males that had horns, but then I found out, now the females too. And those horns will never be shed or dropped. Not like a deer where they lose their antlers. They use those horns as weapons. Those will begin to emerge about the end of the first year. So how do you tell them apart, Cindy? Well, often the pertinent male parts are hidden by shaggy hair that hangs down. And so, you're kind of like looking underneath. The National Park Service, I was like, how do they say Yellowstone? How do they tell them apart? They said the male head, this is directly from their website, the male head is more like a triangle than the female's head. I don't know. Yeah. And then it says the cow's shoulders are narrower than the cow's hips. I don't know. I never get just the right angle. So I'm terrible at telling them apart. But people who work like with bison intensively tell me, oh no, that's a bull, that's a female. So I think a lot of it just comes with proximity and time. But I honestly still struggle with it. How about number 6?
Bison are not listed as endangered or threat today.
Ooh, that's a cool bit because I just assumed they were still in danger, but no. There are 30,000 bison today in public and private conservation herds. So that'd be kind of like our herd that they will have at Burlington Prairie. 400,000 additional bison are raised as livestock. How about that? So like the Ted Turner ranches and things where they have all the bison, but they are protected, and that's because they were almost wiped out. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. They can be legally hunted though in many states, South Dakota, Utah, Montana, Alaska, Wyoming, but it's pretty hard to get a lottery permit. That usually goes into a lottery. It's very rare to get a permit. They have private ranches too in different parts where you can go. They hand you a gun. They say, there's the bison. You shoot it. And now you've shot a bison, right? I know, sad side, doesn't seem very sporting at all. But the fact is you can hunt them. It's just not, it can either be very easy, but if you really did the hunting, we'll say the correct way, it would be very hard to get a permit to do it. They're so cute. How about number 7?
A human can run up to 8 miles per hour. A bison, 35 to 40 miles.
Ooh, so folks at home, I hope you're reading now. What does that tell you? Yeah, there is a good reason you don't want to try to outrun a bison. They're a lot faster than you are, and they can also jump fences, they can turn and spin, and they are good swimmers. So that's why we have signs. This is me out. I was looking at dragonflies out at Nachusa, and I heard a rustling in the palmettos. Now it was a rustling in the grass, and then there was the bison, and it was just going for a swim. And I was like, yep, time to get back to my vehicle. But these warning signs you see on the fences are there for a reason. I was at Buffalo Rock State Park down by Starved Rock with Jeff, and we watched a grandma with her two grandkids. They have bison like behind a little fence. You know, they're in a small enclosure. We watched her go up to the fence with the kids and encourage them to pet the bison. And I was beside myself. I was like, lady, that bison can go right through that fence if it wants to. So those signs are there for a reason. And maybe you remember Tyson the bison out in Wakanda. Do you remember that? A famous bison was supposed to be going to a farm in Lake County and didn't quite came off of the truck, but did not go placidly where the bison was supposed to go, and wandered loose for 8 months in Lake County, including through the forest preserve. So there was always like Channel 5, you know, we're going to have these bison sites. And I would like to say Tyson the bison, called that for many months, was actually Tysonette. And they could not tell that that was a female. I am vindicated, right? Yeah. So it ended up, can you imagine sitting on your porch, just a big bison goes by. It ended up taking a drone, a dog, and a horse to find her. And then they had to tranquilize her and load her on a truck and take her to the farm she was originally going to. And most bison loose stories do not end happily like that, because imagine what it takes to actually tranquilize and move a bison somewhere. So you don't want them to get loose. This is an accident, of course, but not all of these bison incidents are accidents. This is, all you have to do is Google bison encounter with human, and you'll have more than you can read. But look at this. She decided it would be nice to have a selfie with the bison. And I think the cell phone has really aggravated a lot of these things because people want them, you know, for their live stream or whatever. Bison look very placid. Doesn't that bison look very relaxed? But that bison can be on its feet and charging her in just moments. Look at this. Yeah. And I should tell you, these stories did have happy endings in that no one, you know, was killed, but there are many bison stories that don't have such happy endings. Yeah, look, let's get a picture of the bison with us. So the only safe way to like pet a bison is not to pet a bison, right? Not to pet a bison. The only safe way to get a photo of a bison is with a zoom lens behind a vehicle or in a vehicle. In Chasing Dragonflies, my book about dragonflies, there's actually a story of, I was collecting bison data for our citizen scientist project out there. I'm walking around, beautiful day, walking around the pond. I got my clipboard. I walk up the little hill. There's Mama Bison with her baby bison. Is Mama happy to see me? Oh no. And when they have their babies with them, very dangerous, very dangerous. So I ran 8 miles an hour down the hill, and I looked behind me. There's Mama at the top of the hill looking down on me. Now, bison can't see well, but they can smell very well. And fortunately, the wind was not blowing my scent towards her. So she's standing up there and I'm by the pond, and I think, I'm going to get in the pond. So I get in the pond. I try to look like a cattail. And for what seemed like probably like 10 hours, but was probably like 10 minutes, she just stood up there. And then she went back down the hill. And boy, I never again, had gotten away from my vehicle because I was like chasing a drag. I never again got very far away from my vehicle. So I learned my lesson. That was an accident. But you know, many of these are very intentional. There's a safe way to pet a bison, okay? You can definitely do that, but you always have to keep your attention on the bison when you're working in a unit with them. This is a safe way to do it. What are bison afraid of? Bison are afraid of grizzly bears, right? A pack of wolves could bring down a bison, and you know, they'll work together sometimes to fend off a predator. And they're big, and that kind of helps them, and they're fast as well. How about bison bit buff number 8? That's just fun to say. Bison.
Bison migrate. Dragonflies migrate. So do bison.
Ooh, did you know this? I didn't really know bison migrated. And you know, when you look at places like Yellowstone and you watch them, and when they track them, they have GPS collars on them. They found that they know how to move through the seasons to different places in the winter, so which they call it migration, but they will move up to 70 miles from their summer ranges to their winter ranges as the snowpack develops. So they know where they can move, and they remember those paths. There was just a newspaper article on it the other day that said by GPS tracking them, they can see that they remember those migration patterns. I thought that was super cool. And sometimes they migrate outside the park, and that would be like a whole nother program, because that's caused a lot of issues that they're dealing with at Yellowstone. Bison bit number 9. Where's our buff? There's our buff. What do you got for us?
Yellowstone Park is the only place in the U.S. where free-range bison have continuously lived since prehistoric times.
Ooh. How do they know this, we think? How do they know that they've lived there continuously? We know because of the fossil records. We can see bison were there. Native American oral histories that have survived and early traveler histories tell us the bison used to be there. We also know poachers almost decimated that Yellowstone herd from 1,000 bison in 1872 to 24 in 1902. Can you imagine that? I mean, just in that short time, because there were no laws that had teeth in them. And it wasn't until the Lacey Act in 1894, where there was punishment and stiff penalties, that we began to see things change. Many people consider the recovery and protection of bison at Yellowstone one of the greatest triumphs in American conservation. That's the happy news, right? And our last bison bit is number 10. Where's our bison buff?
Bison have some great strategies to get them through the winter.
They do, yes. And when you look at them, you think these animals were born for winter. This is Charles Leary. He let me use these photos for this program. He's a photographer at Nachusa Grasslands, and he has these beautiful bison in winter. I just love this one because it really shows you how they have that thick skin and that under fur, which and layers and layers of fat, and then long guard hairs on that coarse outer fur that is going to help them make it through the winter. They also have like a big hump and a vertebrae. They can swing their heads back and forth and clear the snow off of a place to get down to the juicy roots. And that's why so many cattle perish during those blizzards out west you read about. But the bison were able to make it through. Bison in their first winter are probably at the highest risk of predation. Many of them, you know, also can die from accidents or winter exposure. So it's that first year that's really tough for them, especially getting through the snow. Let's thank our bison buffs. Didn't they do a great job? Yay! All right. And I hope you who are watching at home enjoyed that as well. So when we're hungry, I was just talking to someone about this, we go to Wendy's, right? Or we go to Culver's and get some cheese curds or some French fries, something good. But when bison are hungry, this is where they go. And these are the plants that the wild ones are such champions of, the native plants of Illinois, our garden of home. We know that bison are going to be looking for the juicy grasses. We believe they eat primarily grasses, native grasses. and forage for up to 11 hours a day. That is my kind of eating. I love that. And we think about 99% grasses, but that's still being studied. When they eat those grasses on tall grass prairies, especially the older ones, they are actually managing that prairie for diversity. They're making it friendlier for forbs or flowers and wildflowers. Because older prairies tend to get more grass intensive. So that really helps. I love Gina Roxas, what she says. She's a member of the Potawatomi tribe here in Illinois and the executive director at the Trickster Center in Schaumburg. She has observed bison for a long time. She says, I believe that they are very smart animals, she told me. And she said, I believe they select specific plants when they're not feeling well in order to feel better. So as she watches them, she feels like their choices are very intentional. And I love that. What plants do they not eat? Well, these are pasque flowers. Can you see on the little purple flowers on your screen if you're at home, and then up there on the screen? They will avoid a lot of the wildflowers. And these are one of our early spring blooming plants. And you can see all the bison dung, but they've left those purple, beautiful pasque flowers alone. So when you put a bison on a prairie, it changes the prairie. They really have this strong relationship with it. You see wallows where they roll. We think they roll because it helps reduce pests in their fur. They may also wallow during rutting season, just to show what manly bison they are, and leave their scent. Sometimes they urinate in the wallow and roll in it. It's like Old Spice for bison, a little cologne on before the big date. And it's a social interaction, we think, as well. In the hot days of summer, they lay on their tummies. And you can see them out like this, just like your dog or cat will lay on something cool and like a tile floor and try to cool off a little bit. So, when a bison does all this, it really changes the prairie. So when you see a prairie without bison, it's going to be a different kind of prairie than a prairie that has bison on it. And bison, because they are grass feeders, also create a vegetation structure that is going to be attractive to grassland birds. And if you follow birds at all, their grassland birds are in trouble. And so when we put bison on a prairie, we're giving it that patchy, look that a lot of bobolinks, upland sandpipers, grasshopper sparrows, they like that shorter, patchier kind of look. So plus the bison are pooping everywhere and that's great fertilizer for the prairie. And then their dung is going to attract certain insects that are good, and they will decompose that into the soil. Their hooves are planting seeds. Their hair, their fur is going to move seeds around on the prairie. So, they're just doing so many things. So it's very, very cool to watch them, I think, and to see the differences that they make on a prairie. The habitat itself, we know that in the past, there were so many bison on a prairie that if you were out on a cold winter day, you could see the clouds from their exhalations before you would ever see the bison themselves. I can't even imagine what that would have looked like. Indigenous people set fire to the tall grass prairies and managed them. And we know those prairies needed that fire to keep the prairies from becoming woodlands or shrublands. And that made it easier for them to hunt the bison. They use the bison for many, many important things. Their clothing, the tools, even to make toys. In fact, the bison was a religious symbol for many tribes, especially the Great Plains tribes. The National Park Service tells us for the Lakota tribes, the bison or American buffalo was a sacred symbol that embodied both life and abundance. And also, we hear from the Lakota people, this is a quote, bison provided food and other resources, and we in turn honored and cared for the bison. So it was that reciprocity, that reciprocal relationship. As John Lame Deer said, it was hard to say where the bison ended and we began. We had that kind of relationship. And Gina told me that in Illinois, it was a little different relationship for the Potawatomi and the bison. It was much more utilitarian than religious, but there weren't as many bison here. So every tribe had a little different kind of relationship. So when you think of bison on a tall grass prairie and you think of Illinois and North America, this is what the prairie region looked like. And, you know, the bison would be in this region with the tall grass prairie. And you can see that as a moving area as fire and weather shaped where the prairie was. In Illinois, we had 22 million acres of tall grass prairie. Today, we have only about 2,300 acres of that original tall grass prairie left. So it's quite a bit of it is gone. As we know. But Native Americans knew those prairie plants. They knew the bison. They knew the plants they fed on. They knew the uses for those prairie plants, and they were very connected to it as well. I think too, when we think of the bison and we think of Illinois, it's important to remember there's several reasons we lost the bison here. One is when the guns came into Illinois and Native Americans were armed with horses and guns, it was much easier for them to hunt the bison than it had been on foot with bow and arrow. And then for, of course, the white settlers were coming in and they had guns and they were shooting the bison as well. Have you seen, who has seen Blood Memory? Who has seen that? Anyone? This is a Ken Burns special. The American Buffalo was the special, and then the book went along with the movie. You have to have several boxes of Kleenex if you're going to watch it, because it's a really sad story. But in short, it talks about how manifest destiny, where we believe we were fated, the white settlers, to move from coast to coast, kind of moving the bison and the Native Americans in front of us. When that was the belief of the government, then one of the most important things was to get rid of everything that stood in the way of that. And they realized that important symbolic and religious connection, especially with the Plains Indians and the bison. So the thought was, and this is another quote, kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. So they knew by wiping out the bison, they could really wipe out and weaken Native American people and the Native American way of life. And then began the Great Slaughter. The National Park Service tells us it took place between 1820 and 1880. In 60 years, the bison population went from about 30 to 60 million, not really sure, to fewer than 1,000. 1,000. At their lowest numbers, we think there may have only been 300 bison left. Wow. And so Native Americans no longer had their food source. They were forced onto reservations and had to eat government supplied food instead of their traditional food. By the end of the Great Slaughter, there was nothing really left but bones. And so the bones were taken. And people went out and collected and crushed the bones. They were used for fine china. They were used for refining sugar, of all things, and crushed for fertilizer. So not only was the bison wiped out, any sign of the bison was eradicated. Even the bones were picked up. But there are always people, this is the happy part. Okay, if you're getting depressed back there, I see a lot of sad faces, as we should be. The happy part is people noticed and they said, we probably should do something here. These are just a few of the people we can thank for saving the bison today. Teddy Roosevelt, who was a big hunter. He shot a lot of bison, but he also said, we gotta, we're losing them. We gotta bring them back. Hunters sometimes are the biggest spokespeople for conservation. James Scotty Phillip, nicknamed the man who saved the buffalo. He bought bison calves and had a herd that became very important in saving the bison. William Temple Hornaday went out to shoot bison because they didn't have stuffed bison for the Smithsonian. And he looked and looked and looked and couldn't find any. And then when he found him, he shot him, brought him back and said, we probably have to do something here. So he became an ardent conservationist. Michael Pablo, or I should say Michael Pablo, he was the son of a Blackfoot woman, and he purchased with Charles Allen 13 bison, and he helped keep the Native American tribes supplied with bison and keep their ceremonies, their songs, their rituals alive. Otherwise, they might have been lost. But I love Molly Goodnight. Her husband wanted to shoot all the bison because he was running cattle, and she felt sorry for the bison, so she took the orphan bison calves and raised a herd, and her herd was going to become very, very important in establishing the conservation herds we have today. So isn't that kind of gives you a little hope, doesn't it? All things were not lost. We know today in popular culture, the bison is our national symbol, right? It is our national mammal. Did everybody know that? I didn't really know that until I was learning more about bison. We know bison are on our sports teams. We have lots of town names with bison and buffalo. The Department of the Interior uses the buffalo as its symbol. More sports teams. National Park Service patch has a white bison on it. I was at Buffalo Wild Wings with my grandkids this week, and they were like, "How does a bison have wings?" I was like, "Well, you gotta use your imagination." And then there is the buffalo nickel. Do you all remember the buffalo nickel? Okay, raise your hand, and at home you can type in the chat box if you want. If you know and you have to raise your hand, what's on the other side of the buffalo nickel? Raise your hand if you think purple coat. And hey, buffalo. So I have to rub back, so I'm talking to the screen, right? Hello. Yes, so she said on the other side is a Native American, and yes, it is. And so I love those buffalo nickels. We just gave her one for her correct answer. And this was actually based on one or two Native Americans who posed, where the legend varies, but who posed for this particular thing. Jeff has just a little bison music he's going to play for us. And do you want to try doing it up here? Okay, we'll see if you can hear it at home. If not, I can always sing it for you. Send me an email. I'll sing it to you later. But bison have influenced music. Native Americans have particular drumming songs that they use when they are releasing the bison or doing various rituals with the bison. And you can go to YouTube if you want to hear these online. Just Google drumming songs for bison. But I like this one. This is the Eagle Drum Society. There was a really popular time where we had the buffalo rag music. Remember when that jazzy kind of music was important? This is Tom Turpin. He was a Native American, or excuse me, an African American composer. And we even have some contemporary bluegrass music. This is the Tallgrass Express String Band. And this is a really fun song about the bison.
Buffalo that drift across the grass, like shadows of night clouds you go, the days your herd will pass.
And it's all about the buffalo, so it's really fun to listen to. Thank you, Jeff. He worked so hard to run that music. But yeah, you can Google buffalo music too when the program is over. There is some fun stuff on there. Gail Dowell, we see buffalo jewelry. She is a member of the Osage tribe out in Kansas, and she tries to craft tallgrass prairie and bison related jewelry. Isn't that beautiful? because she believes in the prairie and she wants to bring it to a bigger audience. Lots of painters, George Caitlin. This is an oil on canvas of the bison in winter. Charles, Marion Russell, many large series of bison hunts by Native Americans. You can see in some of our finer museums. More contemporary, Philip Giraffe did this out at Nachusa Grasslands. He paints the bison and the prairie today and tries to bring it to people's attention. He had several showings in the Chicago region. Heather Baker, who's out at Nachusa Grasslands, she's an artist who takes the seeds from prairie plants and makes these beautiful prints. You can see the milkweed seeds or the shaggy mane. Isn't that gorgeous? I have this print at home. So lovely. She sells them on Etsy. And William Nettlehorst, who's a sculptor, he couldn't get anybody to go out to his prairie in his backyard. He said people didn't want to go back. So he said, I'm going to build a bison. So they have to go back and look at it. So he drew it. Then he got materials from his prairie and started putting them together and put them on a little sawhorse. And this is what he got when he was done. And in fact, the South Dakota Museum now is just, he told me, has just offered for it and is going to put it in their museum. So I guess it won't be in his yard, but he said it was really fun just to see a bison that was made of prairie materials. Charles Leary, who's a photographer at Nachusa, beautiful paintings of the bison. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? You can see that escalation and in the summer and in the winter. So check out his work at charlesleary.com. He's very wonderful photographer. And lots of metal bison. For some reason, even a bison bicycle rack. I just like saying that. Poetry, our poetry has been informed by bison. Mary Oliver has a great poem. It's long, so I won't read it, called Ghosts, but do try to look that up and read it. And then Carl Sandburg, our own Chicago poet, who wrote The Buffaloes Are Gone, and those who saw the buffaloes are gone. Those who saw the buffaloes by the thousands and how they pawed the prairie sod into the dust with their hooves, their great heads down, pawing on in a great pageant at dusk. Those who saw the buffaloes are gone, and the buffaloes are gone. Just so haunting. Check out the books. I told you resources. I bet the library has Blood Memory. And also the documentary, The American Buffalo by Ken Burns. Check out our local Illinois author, Robert Morrissey, who writes People of the Ecotone, an academic work which is fabulous for understanding bison and Native American tribes right here in Illinois. Read Roger D. Silvestro's Return of the Bison, which is a very up-to-date look at what is happening with bison today. I really like this book. I think you would too. If you're a hunter, look at Stephen Reinella's American Buffalo. He talks about getting a lottery ticket to hunt them in Alaska. And he ends up coming back with a bison being chased by grizzly bears. So it's very riveting reading. And then Buffalo for the Broken Heart by Dan O'Brien, where he takes his cattle ranch and decides to, after 20 years when he's going broke, raise bison. He raises them and sells them for meat. Very healthy meat to eat. And he also realize the conservation aspect of his land and the relationship that the bison have. He's very respectful. And today, as we close, you can go to Nachusa to see the bison. You can take a tour. They have a roundup, which is very humane. Instead of chasing them with ATVs, they have a little ATV a little truck with a special horn, and when the horn goes or beeps, the bison know it's bison cookie time, and they follow it into the corral. So it's like so different than what you see, the wild chases and things. They're only in the chutes for very short time, And then they're out enjoying a little bit of hay there, like this guy. You can also see them sometimes from the visitor center, but best thing is to call and book a tour. Then you'll be sure and see them. Medewin, of course, great place to go see bison down by Joliet. And you can see them on the Bison cam that they have online. Fermilab, great place to go see bison. You can go for a little hike and see them, just like me and my family did. They have some bison up in McHenry County Conservation Area, and they have programs. You can't just go see them, but you can see when their public programming is and go look at them. And then, of course, you heard the word on the Kane County Bison at Burlington. It's going to be very exciting. I'm really excited for you all. And the hopeful note to leave on is the Intertribal Buffalo Council, groups of Native American tribes who have banded together to ensure that bison are brought back to the Native American people. And many of the people we've talked about here, like Nichusa, give some of their bison back to the tribes. And I just see that as such a hopeful sign for our future. In fact, when the SNAP benefits were discontinued and people were hungry, there was a whole story in the New York Times last week about how the bison actually provided food for some of these Native American tribes and kept them from going hungry when they lost some of the SNAP benefits. So fascinating. You can check that out. We are the most dangerous species of life on the planet, and every other species, even the earth itself, fears our power to exterminate, but we are also the only species, when it chooses to do so, who will go to great lengths to see what it can save that it might destroy. We did that with the bison. So thank you for coming to hear about the bison. I hope you learned a few things, and I hope that as you leave, you will also be looking at the library for more things to read about bison. Yeah.
Press your video, people at home can't see you.
Oh,
But that's
hello.
So, no, press, if you click on the video. and then-
Okay, she's gonna get us all set up here. All right. Do check out the books too, if you like. They're on sale for you tonight if you're interested. And you can always email me at cindycrosby.com. I would love that.
I don't know where it is. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Come on up. I don't know where it is either. And remember what the poet Mary Oliver said, paying attention. This is our illicit work and proper work.
And
Thanks
please
for
look at
paying
Cindy's books
attention.
over here. Those.
Yay. Okay, do we have time for questions?
We do. We just, I don't know where.
I'll stand over here, yeah. Did anybody have any questions?